Hi, welcome to Talk About Digital, the place you will learn the truth about digital. We have got a real treat for you all. Bill Slawski is the Director of SEO Research at Goldfish Digital and probably best known for his constant passion of studying Google and Bing patents. His SEO career started way back in 1996 before Google even existed. Apart from being a super in tune with the in-depth workings of SEO, he is a really nice guy, and I'm super excited to welcome Bill to our unscripted, unrehearsed, informal TAD interview where anything could happen.
TAD's not a business and it's not profit making, it's just me and another guy trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
Doing our little bit to try and make a difference. And it's and I was so pleased when you agreed to have a chat with me, because you understand things a lot more because of the patent side as well.
So I sometimes get called a patent analyst by people who do things like write magazine articles or editors for places like a search engine journal. And I have to remind them that my purpose for looking at patents isn't to learn about patents, because I'm looking at search-related patents. I'm trying to learn what Google is doing, or Microsoft, and Google is going through lots of evolutions. They've gone through a lot of changes even within the last year. They've focused more upon artificial intelligence and machine learning than they ever have before. I don't have a degree in computer science. I've got an English degree and I've got a law degree, which means I'm supposedly trained in analysis, logical analysis, and reading. And I've had people with computer science degrees tell me, no, you're wrong about what this patent says. And I said, okay, what do you say it says? And they tell me, and it's like, okay, so you've described about 6 lines from the patent and what it says. You missed the whole rest of the patent. You've got to learn how to read the whole thing.
I think a lot of the time is the information is there. It's just people's too lazy to go and look for it.
Yeah.
I think that, I just find it really hard to understand when Google do something and everyone's really shocked, because if they'd actually studied all the patents, they'd get a good idea of what Google's actually thinking about. Maybe they don't do everything, but it's sort of, from an SEO point of view, you can sort of predict the future a bit better.
So Google came out with the patent 7 years ago, and I read it and I said, it's going to take some time to go through this, but I think it's really important. And it was on how Google might substitute synonyms for words in queries. They wouldn't necessarily look for words that were adjacent to each other, but they would look at a whole string of words, a full, complete sentence. It was more spoken queries than written queries. And I spent 5 weeks writing or going through the patent, trying to figure out what it says and writing something about it. And the day I decided, okay, so Danny Sullivan gets online and he starts talking about Hummingbird. This patent's all about Hummingbird. It can't be about anything else.
From a patent point of view, is there anything you've picked up on that sort of, outlines where we're all heading in the SEO industry?
Okay, so there's one that came out earlier this year called Website Representation Vectors, which said Google's using neural networks to classify websites on a level where they're identifying the niche and the level of expertise in writing the content of the websites. So they gave an example, and the example rang some bells in my mind. It's if we have a medical website and it's written by doctors, those are expert writers. If it's written by doctors in training or student doctors, those are like intermediate level experts. If it's written by lay people, and some medical websites will be written by lay people, those are intended for people to ask questions that they would ask about regular people experiencing something. Like the difference would be for the experts, the doctor websites, what are the symptoms of diabetes? For the lay people website, what's a good breakfast for somebody who has diabetes? It's not asking for that same level of expertise. And what Google then said was, okay, we'll take query terms and we'll look at query logs and we'll use a machine learning approach to identify the knowledge domain of those query logs. So in addition to identifying the knowledge domain of websites, we'll identify knowledge domains of queries. So when people perform a query, we'll try to find an answer to that query from the appropriate classification of website. So what they're doing is they're making it easier or more efficient to search. You say, okay, so what are the symptoms of diabetes? Is a medical expert knowledge domain query. And they only have to look for answers amongst medical expert website. Now, one of the things that they're doing, and one of the things this patent says is, before we use this website as a place for answers, we'll try to see if it passes certain thresholds for quality, make sure it meets quality scores. This all reminded me of the Medic update.
Yeah.
Our expertise, authority, trustworthiness, because they are looking for signs of trust, signs of expertise, and they are trying to identify sites as being authoritative sites. So it doesn't ring all the bells for AT, but it rings most of them.
When did you start out in the SEO industry?
When did I start out? 1996.
Oh, a bit before me. I'm a late starter. I didn't start till 2001. I started out in SEO before, well, I was actually doing SEO before I even heard the word SEO.
Yeah.
You know, just like many of us, you know, just launched a website and thought, how can I get people to it? And I started testing things, and then I sort of heard this word SEO, and it's like, oh, well, that's what I've been doing.
I had a friend who told me one day how much he hated his job. He was working as a service manager in a car dealership. And he just said, I don't want to go back. I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, well, I'm reading this book about people helping people incorporate businesses in Delaware. I said, and the technical needs, the ability to do this is you have to maintain a mail address to receive notices from the courts that somebody might be trying to sue somebody. So you're their agent for a business, and you charge them a certain amount of money per year, and you act as their agent. If there's some type of lawsuit against them, you receive a notice, you inform them. That's your job. He said, okay, I could do that. And we had another friend who was practicing law, was renting a house, had an empty office in the house, and they talked to each other and decided to go in together on this. And the one friend who wanted a new job would work at the empty room in that office. The only problem they had was they saw the need for a website. And they said, we don't know how to do that. I said, it's okay. I bought a book, Learn How to Build a Website in 2 weeks, learn HTML in 2 weeks, and I spent 2 weeks and built a website. And we launched it. And once we got that out there, it needed to be promoted. So I started learning how to promote it. My one friend's sister worked at Digital.Corp or Digital Corp, selling computers. And she sent us an email one day saying, hey, you guys might like this website that our company started a couple of years ago. It's altavista.digital.com. And I went and checked it out and said, yeah, we need to be in this. So figured out it was submitting URL by URL, but it was worth doing. And once we got into that and Google came out, we said we need to be in that one too. So that's when I sort of started doing SEO, and the search engines started showing up and we saw needs to be in them.
How did that turn into a business for you? What was the ultimate moment where you stumbled upon something, then suddenly it became a business?
I was working to promote their website, and I joined a forum for a small business and website promotion run by Kim Kraus-Berg. And we answered people's questions about promoting websites and forming legal business structures and stuff like that. And that turned into answering questions about SEO. And I ended up having other people ask me for help with websites. So the small business forum turned into create a site forums. And it became more popular and more popular until in 2005, Lauren Baker asked me if it was okay if he posted a job posting on the forum. And I asked him, well, what is it for? He said, well, we're hiring an SEO in Havertide Grace, Maryland. I said, that's about half an hour from me. And so what is it? Tell me about the position, because I'm actually interested. And he told me, and it sounded good. I applied. I mean, it was half an hour away. It got me a chance to actually leave the courthouse, leave what I was doing there, and do SEO. And I said, okay, I can do this. This is a good experience.
And you've never looked back?
No, I haven't.
I see you posted a little bit there. No, I'm going to say is obviously over the past 20 odd years, there's been many, many, many changes in the SEO industry. What would you say is the biggest change?
The biggest change didn't take place overnight. It was a long time coming. It was, okay, we often think about SEO, we think about a link graph. We think about websites connected by links and search engines trying to follow all those links, find the web pages, index them, and give people access to that index to answer their queries. Google started crawling the web to find facts and connections between those facts, relationships between entities on web pages, or between entities and attributes of those entities, when somebody's date of birth was, who they're married to, where they work, things like that, or classifications for those entities. The Chicago Cubs is an American baseball team, things like that. So it was a type of change that led to Google coming out with the knowledge graph and engaging in question answering, like showing featured snippets, or people also ask questions. So it's knowledge evolution. When Google changed the name of their search division to a knowledge division in the early 2000s, that was a reflection of a movement away from search as a thing exploring a link graph to a way of identifying knowledge. Knowledge is information about relationships between entities and attributes, entities and classifications. Knowing what those relationships are between those things is knowledge. And Google's become more of a knowledge engine than a search engine.
Google, realistically, it's that connection between, well, someone's asking for something.
Yeah.
How does Google then find the best website, the best page to actually serve them? Obviously, it's an ongoing process, but do you think they're getting it right?
So Google is attempting to analyze the intent behind a query. And when somebody asks what, and this is an actual example from a patent, what is the hotel in the Middle East that's shaped like a sail from a sailboat? Somebody's asking for a specific hotel. They have one in mind that they want to find the name of. They're searching for an entity. So Google knows this is a question about knowledge. This is a question about a specific entity. When somebody says, what are the best restaurants in New York City? Google knows that the answer people want is most likely a list of links to of URLs to restaurants.
Do you think Google's getting it right?
I think they make the mistakes from time to time, but most of the time they're getting it right. They're constantly evolving these methods. So right now I'm reading a patent about using machine learning to answer questions, and it's a much more complex method than what they've used in the past to answer what we refer to as featured snippets.
When it changed from an algorithm to machine actually thinking for itself and making changes based on things it's found, then obviously that comes into a whole different arena.
Well, let me introduce a definition of an algorithm that I came across in a book, because I've been doing lots of reading of books about computer science and machine learning and artificial intelligence. So one author said an algorithm is problem solving. So often many of the patents I read start out with, this is a problem that we have now in our industry. And this is the current shape of how we solve that problem. It has some problems. It doesn't always work well. We can do it differently. Here's how we propose to do it differently. This is our process. And they describe a process that solves that problem. So the algorithm is solving problems.
I love that. Do you know what? I've never heard it described like that before. I've heard it described so technical, you wouldn't know what they were talking about. But I love that. I really love the stripping it all right back as to what actually is it. And this just gets me so passionate. And I think a lot of the time in the SEO industry and digital marketing overall is, I think a lot of things are made to sound a lot more complicated. But if you strip it right back, think of it from a logical sense and look at, well, what actually is it? You think, why did I think of that?
Right. So there are difficult parts to it. So natural language processing, you hear that, you think, okay, so that's the way people talk. So the hard part isn't understanding the way people talk. The hard part is getting the computer to understand the way people talk. And that's where the challenges come in. So people ask a question of a computer, they ask in normal, natural language, a computer's got to be able to understand what somebody's saying, what they're actually asking for.
How do Google answer different accents, and the way in different parts of each country is say things differently, which means the same thing. And so how do Google understand that in that accent, in that dialect, it means this?
Okay, so it's a sort of a two-stage process here. When Google gets a voice query, it often does a speech-to-text translation, and then it responds to the text. However, an accent could be considered noise in some cases, and it could be considered information in other cases. If Google can recognize the accent, Google can personalize the response. So if Google recognizes that you have a British accent and you're searching from New Jersey, Google might say, when you're asking about football with the British accent, you might want something different than American football.
I mean, I know when I first bought, Amazon Alexa thing, oh my goodness, did it understand my accent? No, I nearly threw it out of that window because I don't want that. I just want this song. Please play this song. I just want it. Just tell me. And it just, then I sat back and thought, well, it's language. I start thinking about Google, about how difficult it must be for them. Is the way the same things can be said in 1,000 different ways.
So I mentioned football as an example. I chose it on purpose because there is a difference between what I think of when I say football and what you think of when you say football. And if you're from Australia and you say football, it's a completely different game. So Google does do some type of preferred country biasing when they're answering queries. They're saying, okay, so this person from this country, they may have checked off in their browser that they have a preferred language, and we can tell where they're searching from. We're going to try to answer what they may be looking for, using the context, where the person's from, what their accent is, and so on. So context matters.
What are the top things SEOs need to stop thinking about?
So I sort of, with that article, I sort of said, okay, the focus has to be on critical thinking. If you're going to write about SEO, make sure you have supporting evidence. Make sure you can make an argument for yourself that's a realistic argument, has a thesis, it has a analysis, it has a conclusion, and cross all the T's, dot all the I's, give a complete answer. Make sure that people, if you're going to show a list of correlations, and you're going to leave it at correlations without proving that there's any causation, don't just leave it there. I mean, so I've done a study with 9 million websites that shows that the top 10 websites are at least 2,000 words long each. Is a correlation, saying something like the longer an article might be, the more of a chance the search engine has to index important content within that article. It means articles that are longer might rank more for more terms. That may not be true, but it's at least an attempt at causation. So if you're going to do the correlation study, try to understand why that correlation exists, if there's a connection. So there's a well-known study that shows that convenience stores purposefully place diapers near beer because they found out that the more diapers they sell, the more beer they sell.
Yeah, I can see the similarity.
So they've studied that and they try to understand why. And it seems that a lot of young fathers, a lot of new fathers would often reward themselves for having picked up the diapers by picking up beer. So there's definite causation. There's a causation and there's a correlation. And they do happen. But if you're going to do a large correlation study, try to figure out some of the causations. See how they're connected. The correlations are an opportunity to actually come up with interesting information that you might find reasons for.
Yeah, I think there's so many things published online that's just people's opinions without any sort of facts or proof to back up what they're saying.
Right.
You know, and it's yeah. I remember being asked by an Australian e-commerce store, saying, "Oh, I've got an SEO working on my website, but can you just check it over for me?" And I looked at the website and I knew exactly what article the SEO person had read, because on every single page there was exactly 2,000 words of content on every single page, and every title had a number and bracketing, whether it was relevant to that page or not.
Yeah.
Obviously, but that's SEOs reading something and not using a brain.
I think I've read that article.
Yeah. I mean, I just looked at it and I knew immediately what article it was, where if they just use common sense, in fact saying, oh, well, this study shows that the majority of websites get a better click-through rate and it ranks better if it's 2,000 words. But if you spend all your time getting someone to a product page, why write 2,000 words linking them back to the top end of the funnel?
Right.
You know, it's just...
If somebody searches for pizza around lunchtime, they want a web page that will deliver slices of pizza to them. They don't want the history of pizza. They don't want 2,000 words about pizza.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. But I find, you know, is in the SEO industry, is I class it in my own head as two different sides. You've got SEO robots and you've got the SEO marketers. The majority of people are in the robot mindset. They're just looking for a list. They don't care what it says. They're just looking for a list. And what they do, they go through that list on every single website they work on. And they don't actually understand, well, why something's happened. And that's the difference in the industry. So how can SEO people jump from the robot mindset to the marketing mindset? What do they physically have to do?
They need to do marketing. Unfortunately, the SEO is marketing on the web. So if you're marketing a website, you have to say, okay, who is this website for? Which audiences are the pages on this site for? Are there specific pages for specific members of those audiences? If so, what tasks do you provide for them? What information do you give to them? What problems do you solve? What answers do you have? And you have to include those things. You have to pay attention to the audience. If somebody writes a large study about SEO and they completely ignore audiences, they've missed out.
SEO's understanding who the audience actually is they want to target. You know, it's like keyword research going to the next dimension.
You can't complete keyword research if you don't know who that audience is. You have to know which words they use to describe the goods and products that you offer. And they will likely use the search for those things. And unless you can take that step, you're not going to be able to do complete keyword research.
Like I say, Talk About Digital is all about sharing the truth about digital. So what would you say is the main thing within the industry that needs to change?
I mentioned writing articles, having evidence, making arguments, and supporting them. I think there's a two-way street here. People writing articles need to include those things. People reading articles need to ask the right questions when they see articles. Is this something that actually works? Is it something that will provide effective SEO? Will it help me? Knowing that you have some study that says top ranking pages are usually 2,000 words doesn't necessarily help you, because it doesn't tell you why. And that should be a red flag saying, do you really want to just blindly write 2,000 word long articles? No.
How long does the copy on a page need to be?
It needs to be as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And no
Exactly.
longer and no shorter.
Yeah. It's not rocket science, is it? How important is technical SEO is in the whole sphere of SEO marketing?
There's some things that do provide help with the rankings of websites and help some websites rank better than others. There are mistakes people make that often are outside of guidelines from search engines. And if you do those, you want somebody saying, no, this is not a good idea, don't do this. So you want a technical SEO to be able to look through your website and find all those things and warn you about them and say, no, this isn't the way you should do this. You shouldn't tell people, here's our link resource page. If you want to be on it, just link to us first and send us a copy of that link and we'll put you on here. No, that's a good way to get a manual penalty. And so there are things that don't work well and you shouldn't do. And technical SEO should be able to go through your site, identify those things, and warn you about them.
So do you think the Google guidelines are SEO's Bible?
They have a lot of information in them that's useful, but there are some things that they don't necessarily cover. I had one client who had service pages where the client had described the services very clearly. And I said, okay, this is a problem, and this is why maybe you're not getting too many of these customers. You need to flesh out this content. You need to make it more clear about what you're providing and what people can expect. They rewrote the content, and their return on investment rose incredibly, almost overnight, because people could actually understand what they were providing. And that's not something that's really necessarily pointed out in the Webmaster Guidelines, but it's an essential part of SEO.
So what top 3 things should SEOs be mindful of?
It's essential to communicate well with your clients and always have a line of communication open and available. Make sure they understand that you are interested in helping them and answering questions they have. Because once you achieve that level of communication, you can get a lot more done. As long as they feel comfortable asking you questions, and they should.
A lot of time, it's just down to communication.
Right. If you ideally, you should have one person who's a point of contact on your client's team, and that's a person you work towards, because this way that person can become the evangelist for your company if it's the right person, and you'll be able to tell that soon. But they're the person who, as long as you limit the communications through one person, on the other side, you're making sure you don't have 2 or 3 different things going on at the same time. You just have one thing going on with one person. They're the person who gets communications from their team sent to you through them, and that makes things easier. It allows for more effective communications.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your time. I know your time's valuable, and I'm sure, you know, the talk about digital community will really find everything beneficial. Just as a final thing on, is there anything you want help with yourself that people out there could help you with? Because obviously it should never be about one-sided. It's always about both. It should be both sides. So obviously yourself, you're always out there. You're always on Twitter. You're always giving advice. And I just want to ask, is there something you actually would like in return from the community?
Sometimes I ask questions on Twitter, and I learn a lot from reading the answers. Like recently I asked, how long does a typical SEO, how long does it take to see results from SEO? And I got lots of answers from a lot of people, and they were thoughtful answers. It was good to see them. It's good to get that type of response. And I'd love if people would respond when I ask things like that. I'd like to see them on Twitter.
Good. And where can people find you, and what reasons would you like them to reach out to you?
So I'm frequently on Twitter. I blog at SEO by the Sea, and I blog on the Go Fish Digital website, and comments are fine there. I'll answer questions people have. Both blogs have comments, and
from myself, I really want to personally thank you, because it might have been a bit of a strange interview scenario, because I never know what I'm going to ask, and I don't believe in structure and scripting and things, but I find that it's been so valuable just to have an open and honest chat. You are a true gent, and you know, the industry really needs you. It's without you, who else is going to tell us all about the payments? Who else is going to keep us informed and everything? But yeah, well, all the best. Please keep safe, and just carry on doing what you do. And if there's anything at all you need help with, you only need to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, it's been a real pleasure.